Good morning. Here we are once again, and we're continuing our walk with Jesus through the book of Mark. And we get today to a passage that, well, quite honestly, it might be a little troubling to people because it certainly has to make us look at our own spiritual disciplines. Let me read to you from Mark chapter 2, verses 18 through 20. John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and they came and said to him, "Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "While the bridegroom is with them, the attendants of the bridegroom cannot fast, can they? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. But the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in that day." Fasting was not eliminated, it was simply delayed because there was going to be a more appropriate time for that fasting to take place. So, does this apply to us? And I wonder how many of us fast? How often do we even talk about fasting? Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, talked about giving, he talked about prayer, and he talked about fasting. Not in terms of if you choose to do these things, but when you do these things. So, here's a few things for us to consider. By the time that this event was taking place, Jesus was with them, and fasting was a well-established spiritual discipline long before Jesus came. It's spoken of clear back in the law. It's spoken of through the rest of the history that is presented to us in the Old Testament. We see that on a number of occasions, God's people were fasting. Well, we commonly think of fasting as simply that of going without food, and that truly is the way that it is most often represented in Scripture. But Isaiah throws a twist in here for us to consider. We have to think about this. If we're studying the subject of fasting, Isaiah 58 represents true fasting, it says, as taking care of people. In a general sense, we could say that we could make a case for the fact that fasting is simply the practice of any spiritually important thing, but it requires some self-sacrifice, some inconvenience, maybe some discomfort. But there's a reason for us to be drawn to fasting. Now, be very careful here. Don't just excuse this away, because it's very easy to do that. On a number of occasions, we can make excuses why we're not fasting. And there are some people, because of blood sugar situations and such, have to handle that in a very special way. But don't just throw this subject away. It's spoken of too often in Scripture. There is a strength to actually fasting from food. Jesus did it. Early Christians did it. And it was viewed as an important way to rid oneself of the concerns of this world and enter into the presence of God with our own sacrifice, our own sacrificial attitude. Well, when they came questioning him why his disciples were not fasting at that moment, it was an expectation, evidently, that they would be fasting. But then Jesus pointed out to them that there was a reason why they were not fasting at that time. He said that the day would come that his disciples would fast, but not while the bridegroom, that is Jesus himself, was with them. It would come after the bridegroom had left them. Well, he isn't with us now in that sense, and we claim to be disciples. So, where is the fasting? I might ask, where is the outward demonstration of any spiritual discipline? In our world today, it's very easy to call oneself a Christian and to just kind of coast along in ease. But fasting calls us to do something more than that. Now, before we put fasting into this box of only things that happened long ago, maybe we need to understand that it truly is still relevant for us today. And before we jump to the false conclusion that we're doing right now everything that we're supposed to be doing, maybe we ought to take a look at fasting and the other spiritual disciplines to see if, in fact, we are in any way really sacrificing, really giving of ourselves in an inconvenient manner in order to serve God. Because Christians, we all know there is more we can do. There's more we can be. But it doesn't come to us in this pretty box that makes us feel good. There's more to it than that. A greater closeness to God might be achieved by a little inconvenience and maybe by a little discomfort. When we are weak, then we are strong. We understand. Maybe the practice of fasting was given to us for that very purpose, to demonstrate our own self-sacrifice so that we can show our allegiance to our God. Fasting is a very serious matter, and we need to consider it. So today, I'm not calling for you immediately today to fast for the rest of today, but let's begin to give this subject some new thought, some new care, because fasting is evidently something that disciples do. And if we are disciples, we have to look at this subject. Let this be a thoughtful day. Bye for now.
They resound with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient words impart words of life.